Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm glad that you took the time to listen to our story about PANGAEA's data management from two points of view. So the plan today is as following. At first, Sinhué will give you a little overview or just a little reminder what is or what was MOSAiC, and then we will dive into the data management part with me. Because I'm a data editor and data manager in PANGAEA. So that's my point of view. And I haven't been at the MOSAiC expedition. I was supporting the project from Bremerhaven. And then in the second part, Sinhué will take over and he will tell you about his perspective of MOSAiC. Yeah, he will concentrate very much on data and his challenges in the Arctic and with the data analysis and data management. And of course, he will show and share beautiful pictures from the Arctic as well. So the introduction picture was actually taken from a dataset published with us in PANGAEA. Anyway, your turn.
Yeah, okay. Well, hello everyone. Greetings from my side. I guess I'm not the best person to talk about MOSAiC. I was at the bottom of the food chain, but a little bit of info of what MOSAiC was about. So it was MOSAiC stands for Multidisciplinary Drifting Observatory. Yep. For the study of the Arctic climate. It was a massive, massive expedition. There were more than 80 institutes, 20 countries, more than 30 nationalities, more than 300 people working, 100 or so crew members. There were 7 icebreakers taking part, plus other research ships. And then the whole trip lasted 389 days. Also 330 days of research and a total drift of 3,400 kilometers. So it was huge. Here in the figure in the middle, you can see the track of the expedition. It started somewhere. Can you see my cursor? Um, so it started here in this red dotted line, and then it went up. Then the people it was divided in 5 legs. People from leg one had the task of looking for a flow where to set the polar stern, and then off we went. So they did all this red part, and there was a second leg in yellow where I was on board polar stern in winter time. Then leg three, finally leg four, and then there were issues with the drift, not as predicted by the models. So they had to exchange personnel, and then they went back to the North Pole to finish the expedition. And there were also a little bit of a mess because of COVID that pretty much destroyed the original plans. And there were several teams as part of MOSAiC, but for the research there were only or mostly 5. The so-called ATMOS or atmosphere team. They did all sorts of atmospheric chemistry, physics, and whatnot. And the ice team, they look into sea ice physics, biology, and snow as well. Then Team Ocean, for some reason, Team Ocean was physical oceanography, basically, but there were also biological oceanographers and so on. Then Team Biogeochemistry, and then Team Echo. And I was part of the Team Echo. For some reason, nutrient observations ended up in Team Echo, but I guess they should have been in biochemistry. And then, in addition to the MOSAiC logo that many people are familiarized with, there is also this logo, which was kind of cool because it represented pretty much all of the teams in the world. So we all got some nice fleece jackets with a colored part on regarding the team we belong to. So in general, that's it, but it's just a scratch, really. I'm putting here these links where you can read more about it if you're interested. You can see videos, photos, and read more about the research. Now there are lots of papers out of it. Cool. Can continue, Dana.
Okay, now I'm going to attempt to set the scene for the data management part of the MOSAiC. So Avis Computing Center, who was responsible for the data management during the MOSAiC expedition, applied what we refer to O2A data flow framework. O2A means here observation to analysis and archives, and it's a collection of components which should allow the users kind of seamless flow of data from their creation all the way to the publication and dissemination. And it's been developed over the last about 10 years or more. And MOSAiC was the first huge pilot project where we tried to strictly use this concept to the acquisition of all expedition data. And one of the important requirements of such a flow is that the data and metadata that describe the data are stored together at the time of their creation, and their link between data and metadata is maintained throughout the pipeline. So, and the pipeline should not involve USB sticks and computers of individual participants of the expedition and email saying, I'm sending you the data. So we start with the registry part. So during the time of MOSAiC expedition, this component was called sensor, but now we call it registry. And it's an information or metadata system that allows to describe devices and their subdevices. So you can enter information about what it is, type of the device, manufacturer model, series number, and so on. Who is responsible for this device? What are the measured parameters? What are the units? And then it's also possible to add lots of documentation and resources, images, and so on. And this description ideally happens already before the expedition in preparation for it. And during the expedition, the system can store additional information about the device actions like deployments, retrievals, and history, even calibrations and stuff like this. So that allows all the scientific actions that happen during the expedition to be registered. And that happens actually technically in another information system called D-Ship on board Polarstern. And there, the actions can be associated with the correct devices. With this registering scientific action, also a dedicated space was created on the mass storage for storing the data. Then we move on to this ingest. And so after the data acquisition, the data have been ingested and stored on board mass storage, which we called MOSAiC Central Storage, MSC. And the hierarchy of the folders then was followed the device hierarchy in the registry. So from platform to device and subdevice, and then folders for individual actions were also created. And so the data already had their home to live in, and they were transferred there through different pathways depending on the device, via satellite, local LAN, radio LAN, or as a stream, or in delayed mode, like individually or semi or manually. So other components we also have available on board. So here's dashboard. It serves to near real-time data monitoring and quick plotting and quick analysis. And it also includes services like Map Viewer with up-to-date satellite images of sea ice, which is needed for navigation and scientific work on ice. The next component, a workspace, is a kind of summary name for services that make work with data easy. They include, for example, Marketplace, offering environments like Jupyter Notebooks for work with Python or R, RStudio, Bash scripting. And these also provide mounted access to the data storage. And then again, without the need to copy the data on your own computer. So, and after the expedition, the process data are published at repositories such as PANGAEA, which is actually the oldest part of the O2A workflow. And the repositories like PANGAEA then disseminate the data and metadata, and these can be then aggregated in other services such as portals or View. So another way to look at the data acquisition during the MOSAiC and the publication process is shown here. Maybe it will enlighten the process a little bit more. So here we are on board Polarstern. We have the mass storage on board, and the data are stored there. And then the raw and primary data, so already some process data, after each leg of the expedition are taken and physically brought on land, where another copy of the same storage is created at AVI. And it also has the same file structure, um, like following the registry or sensor metadata. And at this time, all these data are open and available for all the MOSAiC participant, for the whole MOSAiC team that agreed to follow the data policy. So then this structured storage makes it possible to then automatically store the data to a long-term archive. This is also in Bremerhaven on tapes. And these data, when they are suitable for publishing in PANGAEA, they can it can be done so semi-automatically without that much effort by the authors, and obtain a citation with a DOI in our repository in PANGAEA. But actually, most of the data we've received from the expedition were so-called primary data or processed data, and these don't flow to us automatically. So at the time when the authors or the providers are ready, their data are, let's say, final in the given version, they can be submitted to us through a submission ticket, and then they go through the editorial process until they are published with a DOI. So different versions, different levels of the data can then be also linked in PANGAEA, and they get separate DOIs. So in the meanwhile, also data from other sources arrive to the mass storage, like for example, data from buoys via satellite or other means. So these are also fed to this land mass storage. Okay, and when data are published with PANGAEA or other repositories, they can be cited. And also in MOSAiC, it was actually very important. We paid lots of attention so that all papers that are based on the data, which are basically all papers, also correctly cite the published datasets as well. So another instrument to govern the data and metadata sharing is so-called data policy, because the aim was a very open sharing within the MOSAiC community early on. It was a major effort to actually agree on common rules, how to work together, so that everyone benefits from early access within the community. But at the same time, the authorship and co-authorship is not taken away from the people collecting the individual data sets. So the data policy was put together over actually a long period by the project board, by the data group, which was a special kind of body, which was formed by a group of representatives of individual scientific teams, so-called data speakers, and from the people from Computing Center, from AVI, and we met monthly and worked on different data-related issues. And it was also put together in cooperation with other repositories which stored MOSAiC data. And the whole effort was coordinated by the data manager, Antonia Emmerts, who is the main author of this document, data policy. And everyone in MOSAiC community who went on board or even wanted to share the data from land, from everywhere in the world, needed to agree and sign this document. So here is a list of topics that, main topics that data policy contained, like metadata standards, description of how the data ingest, transfer, and storage and archiving will happen, about the data provision, access, and sharing, public release of data, and the authorship and acknowledgements. So Also part of the data policy as a timeline with some milestones regarding the data publication. So the dates of the start and end of expeditions are marked here. And the first data will be arriving to AVI already during the expedition, basically after the first leg. And then as I mentioned, the on-land mass and trust storage is formed. And yeah, at the end of the year, and the beginning of the year after the end of the expedition, basically all sensor data should be shared at AVI storage, and also the fast analysis of the laboratory data. The full collection of laboratory data was supposed to be shared at the MCS a year later, and the date that we named as data public release was in the beginning of 2023. So PANGAEA integrated into the O2A framework has been the main data repository for the MOSAiC project. It's operated jointly by AVI and the Marum at the University of Bremen, and we aim to publish the data in a fair way. And for that, we also are certified by several external bodies. The data from the MOSAiC project can be found through search function at PANGAEA, but this would be the fast link where you can find them all listed in one place. So what kind of data they are? They're mostly tabular data. That's actually data that we specialize on in PANGAEA. But apart from that, we also archived lots of images and videos, even audio data. And then data in GeoTIFF format, netcdfs, or all kinds of raw data files, ideally those that can be read by open access software. So these are some numbers and statistics. So in this, on the axis is a time. So how many, and this picture shows how many, what is the cumulative number of data sets published in PANGAEA in time. And you can see at the end of the expedition, we only had about 25 published data sets, and that grew really rapidly. And we reached about half of the now published data set at the time of the actually deadline for the public release. And we are so at about 4,200 data sets right now and still counting. The data are still coming. And by that, I don't want to say that there was something like that people didn't try hard to publish the data. Actually, I think with the hindsight, this deadline of 2023 was a very, very ambitious deadline, and there are still people just coming to us with new data that they were only able to publish now because they didn't have them in expected quality earlier. And this is mainly the case for the laboratory produced data at the moment. But as a data manager in PANGAEA, I was really impressed by the quality of the data submissions. And we've done lots of maybe training and education before the expedition. I wish to believe that we also had a little part in making awareness about the data, and this whole experience of O2A flow with the data supporters on board as well, hopefully played a positive role in the handling of the data by the scientists. So the number of 4,000 submission or dataset published, it's a very high number, and it's partly caused by due to the granularities, or it's not that for one device you would only have one data set. Maybe for one device you would have a daily data set, or for each deployment one data set. So actually this number of about 370 submissions represents a little bit more precisely what kind of number of data we have. So 370 would be probably then the number of either individual data sets or so-called collections coming from one device or something like this. So, but it's already impressive collection. And when you actually find all the MOSAiC data at PANGAEA and plot them on the map of Arctic, I find it really amazing what wealth of data has been created during the MOSAiC expedition, and how much we hopefully learned about the Arctic, especially during the Arctic winter, when not that much information is available otherwise. So it's impressive. So, but as I mentioned, maybe we, PANGAEA, were not the only data publisher that published the data from MOSAiC Expedition. Also, you can go to the MOSAiC Expedition website, and under MOSAiC data, you will find a simple list with pointing you to other sources where to find data. So these are, for example, other repositories. So apart from PANGAEA, some national repositories in the USA, Arctic Data Center and Atmospheric Radiation Measurements Facility as well published loads of data in their own repositories. And the NERC repositories in the United Kingdom also host a fair share of the data. When it comes to MOSAiC portal, so we have created something like this on within the AVI infrastructure at Marine Data. You can go there through the MOSAiC banner to have more data listed than just those in PANGAEA. So here we've put together data sets from PANGAEA, Arctic Data Center, and the NERC repositories. Similarly, like on the PANGAEA website, you can search for the data using the faceted search by, for example, devices, by the lag, and also by the provider, and so on. And on this portal at Marine Data, there is also a viewer which you might want to interact with, and this is still a little bit work in progress. And finally, I would like to also mention some important MOSAiC data products. I'd like to name the project MVRE, Virtual Research Environment. And this project aggregated some important published data from PANGAEA and made them available in a very accessible way for some communities, for example, those who work with software Ocean Data View, ODV. Or they also prepared collections to work with in with data collections in Python Jupyter notebooks. So this is definitely worth checking. Here is the website. And finally, I would like to highlight here the special issue of, or special collection of the Nature scientific data, where up to date we have 18 data descriptors published from the expedition. So these are extremely valuable data sources where these are peer-reviewed journals with all the methodology and some statistics for each device or data type are published. And then each of these descriptors is linked to a data set published in a certified repository. All right, so this is about all I have today. We switch to Sinhué.
Okay, I shared my screen now. And did you see the full view?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, cool. Okay, so in terms of the eco team or ecosystem team, I'm using this infographic from the overview paper led by my colleagues Ali Fong and Clara Hoppe. And this figure shows everything that we deal with within the eco team, and it's just massive. Everything to do with life in the ocean, from the nutrients dissolving the ocean to all the microbial food web, since from how phytoplankton uses nutrients and how that energy is transferred into other other trophic levels, and then there were studies on zooplankton, on the life strategies of all these little bugs to survive the Arctic conditions, and all the way to the relationship with the atmosphere in terms of producing ice nucleating particles or cloud formating particles, and their interaction with the atmosphere, and the biology of ice ridges, and also the biology related to the different stages of ice formation. So everything going from close to winter time to all the productive season, summer and next winter, sea ice melt and how that affects biology, and then the what we call the biological carbon pump, which is the transfer of carbon from the surface to the bottom of the ocean, where it's stored for hundreds or thousands of years. Kind of the contribution of biology to regulating the climate by modifying the CO2 in the atmosphere. Um, and of all this picture, which is actually really complex, I was mostly involved with the nutrients. Let me see if I can see my cursor. Nope, which I highlighted there. Um, and with that, I'll just start. So when we started MOSAiC, at least in my case, it was kind of a simple thing. You know, we have some samples, and then from those samples, we need to get to data, which you can see here in black. And then from that data, then we'll have the means to visualize it and then create funky plots and interpret what's going on in the ocean. But it was not that easy peasy. So to start with, yeah, as Dana described, we had this MOSAiC central data storage, and it had a really nice structure for data, which Dana described. And I think it was really, really nicely designed for instruments that you deploy and then they start producing data. Maybe you can quality control it and stuff like that, and that's it. But for data that comes from experiments, from biological experiments or from analysis, uh, then it's a different issue. So here in the photo, you can see an instrument that is kind of the workhorse in oceanography. We call it CTD only, but basically the CTD is just a set of instruments that measure conductivity, from which you can obtain salinity, temperature, and then pressure, from which you can also obtain depth. And it has all sorts of sensors in it as well, like fluorescence for chlorophyll, ADCPs, and all sorts of oxygen as well, dissolved oxygen sensors. And these gray bottles that you can see there, which are very important for us because these bottles, when this instrument is deployed, they're opened, and then you can close them on the way up, and then you get water collected from different depths. And then when this instrument is on board Polar Stern, then we all go there and then get a bit of water for the respective analysis that we do. So then we had kind of to aim at this sort of storage. And here's just another description of this instrument and how sensor web was structured to get all this information, and so that then this information kind of flows straight into the MOSAiC central storage. But again, for us, it was a bit more complicated like that. To start with, collecting samples. So in this photo, you see this instrument being deployed from Polar Stern, and this is from an expedition in Fram Strait. In the background, you can see Svalbard and all nice, and it's kind of an ideal summertime ice-free conditions in the Arctic. I selected to go in winter time. For me, that was like an amazing opportunity. Who knows if I'll ever go back to the Arctic in winter time? Well, if the opportunity arises, I for sure will. But maybe it's one of those once in a lifetime. But when we got there on a Russian icebreaker, it looked like that. So that's Polar Stern, and we were like, oh dear, that's going to be funky. You know, I was making a video with my phone, and within 20 meters of walking on the ice, it was so cold that the battery of my computer of my phone died, and then the screen froze. It was like, oop, I think that's going to be tricky. Then here there is another photo. So this is the gangway, the stairs going from Porterstern onto the ice, and behind the gangway, you can see a wooden lid. It looks white because it's all covered in ice. And basically, that was the a hole in the ice that our colleagues from Leg One had kind of dig so that this instrument could be deployed. And whenever you open that lid, it looked like that. So we had to work a lot on keeping it ice free. And in order to do so, we had to invest 3 to 4 hours, 3 days per week, and 5 or 6 of us just choking ice and keeping the surface free. And it was impressive. I mean, when the temperature is -20, -25, and the wind is blowing, you can actually see the water ice crystals forming right in front of you. You remove the ice from the surface, but right away the ice starts forming. It's just really incredible. And while a normal deployment of this instrument takes, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes at the most, and is usually done by 2 persons. In MOSAiC, we had to, I think it was like at least 10 people that had to work together to deploy it. Some were holding heaters to avoid the sensors from freezing, and some others were pushing the instrument into a cage that was connected to a hot air pump that was keeping the instruments warm. And then we had to take it out, and the crew will be in charge of putting onto the ice. And then in this photo, you see these wooden rails. We had to put this instrument on these wooden rails and then pushing it to the center, still covered by this warm air cage. And then once it was in the right position, then the instrument will go into the water, because if you expose it a little bit to the air, the instruments can freeze. And then once it was in the water, then we could open the cage, push it back, and then the instrument could be deployed. Sometimes, uh, even doing it that way, the instruments will freeze, and then you cannot bring them up to the surface once they are wet, because they will freeze instantly. So what you do is that you take them down to 200 or so 50 meters depth, which is where the Atlantic water layer resides, which is at a nicely and warm 2 degrees or so, and then wait for everything to defrost, and then bringing them up again to the surface, and then start. So it was lots of work, and I actually got a little bit of frost nip on my cheeks and my nose, just for being exposed to the air for a few minutes there. And then, so that was in terms of deploying instruments and collecting water. Then in the lab, we built ourselves a chemistry lab. So this is how it looked like more or less on the chemistry lab on Polar Stern. And then from here, we have some funky chemistry that produces colors. And then the intensity of these colors is proportional to the concentration of the stuff we're looking for. And then these instruments produce them peaks, and the peaks look like that. And then there is a marker on top of the peaks, which maybe you can see there. And then, oops, sorry, I pushed the wrong button. And then finally, you get the data. And here is where another challenge uh, became apparent, because in this data you have all sorts of information. You have information about quality controls, calibration standards, extra measures to determine the quality of the measurements, and accuracy, precision, and different variables, different methods, and then we were like, okay, so how are we supposed to put this into this MOSAiC central storage? And it was a pain in the butt to deal with, actually, but we got lots of help. And we realized, and also the people who structured all these MOSAiC central storage realized that the structure they had set up was actually not compatible with this type of information. Another big challenge is that when you go to sea, for example, other than MOSAiC, when I go to sea, I bring a team with me, and we are 3 to 5 people just working on this single measurement, and then you do the calculations and all the quality controls on board, all the data processing. But in MOSAiC, we had, rather than having, say, 5 people to work on one thing, we had one person to work on 5 different things. So in leg two, uh, I had the task of leading the eco team on leg two. We were 6 persons, and with these 6 persons, we were supposed to deliver all the ecosystem sampling program, which was not easy, and we were not able to do everything. And so it was mostly about collecting samples, doing analysis. Hopefully everything went okay, and then deal with the data quality control later on. It was just massive. It was just massive. And then for the measurements that I was involved with, we ended up measuring more than 4,000 samples from seawater and from sea ice cores and experiments. And then if we include all the quality controls and then calibration standards, then those 4,000 samples become 5,000. We did in total 70 separated or thereabouts analytical runs. And then when we were at sea, we were measuring 5 variables, but here in the lab, 7 variables, and that was because the main idea was to do the measurements on board Polar Stern, but because of the pandemic, then some of the persons who knew how to run this analysis then were no longer able to go, and from leg 4 to 5, all the samples were collected, and then we had to analyze them here, and that was actually an extra burden, things that we didn't have in mind, and so the machine also was pushed to the limits. When you have this instrument measuring 7 variables at the same time, the software gradually fails to mark the peaks in the right position. So here I hope you can see there is like a black line in one of the peaks. Because sometimes the software puts the marker in the wrong place, and then you have to edit that marker manually. And so when you have 7 variables nor this many analyses, we ended up with in the order of 70,000 peaks that I had to visually inspect, correct, and quality control. And just doing that took 9 months of my time, working at 80% of my time to do that. Then I had a colleague from Sweden who merged this data together with carbonate chemistry data, and he did what we call secondary quality control, which is a different approach where beyond the analytical phase, you also look into the data in the context of historical data and then apply corrections if necessary. And then we were bouncing information each other. And I think it probably took him 5 months to put all together. But as we were no longer able to work only on this, it basically took the most part of 3 years to produce a finally quality control data. And so we were not able to comply with the deadline that MOSAiC had. And the nice idea was that we generate the data, we do our science, and then we make the data publicly available. But actually, no, many people are now using this data, and I still haven't addressed my science actually. But it was a big responsibility. I signed this document where I said, yes, I will make this data available by the time we were asked to do so. And voila, at some point, hopefully I'll get to do it. And that's pretty much my experience. In terms of publishing in PANGAEA, that was easy peasy. Once you submit the data to PANGAEA, then you just need to produce a small report. In my case, I'm just showing here just screenshot of the cruise reports where we provide information about the analysis, instrumentation, variables, and so on. Then the people from PANGAEA check it, and then they tell you, oh, it doesn't read well, or maybe you should include this and that. And then they also provide information about the format, which I'm showing here in this table, for example, with units, information of the variables and what they represent. And then you kind of exchange several emails until PANGAEA are happy that the data is in the right format. And then voila, data publish. And we only managed to do that at the beginning of this year. I think I submitted the data in December last year, and then bouncing messages with guys from PANGAEA. I think it was finally published in March, I think. So a year or so later after the deadline. But hey ho, that's the way it goes. That's the way real things happen, actually. Hopefully at some point I can do the science.